What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 20 of What's That Sound podcast. My name's Stu Watts, and today I talked with Aaron Dobos, who is a Melbourne-based engineer, producer, and mixer. This episode, we talk a lot about his experience as an assistant engineer and all of the things that he learnt while he was doing that, as well as recording things the way that you want them to sound at the time that you're recording rather than fixing it in the mix, as well as getting a mix to sound like a finished song as quickly as possible so that you can easily hear what needs fixing. All that and heaps more on today's episode of What's That Sound? You're listening to What's That Sound with your host, Stu Watts. What's going on, everyone? This is another episode of What's That Sound podcast. My name's Stu Watts, and today I'm here with Aaron Dobos. Welcome, Aaron, to the podcast.
Hey, man. How's it going?
Doing well, doing well. How's your day been so far?
Oh, it's been very relaxed so far, which is nice. Good start to the day.
Unreal. Love to hear it. Well, let's kick it off with a little bit about who you are and what you do in the music industry.
Yeah, name's Aaron Dobos. I sort of make records and mix records and that kind of thing. Been doing it for a long time, maybe like 13, 14 years probably.
Yep.
I reckon. Yep. Yeah. So yeah, started as an assistant, or started as like a work experience kid and then as an assistant and engineering and it's sort of now rent space and sort of freelance. It's sort of the only job I've ever had.
Well, we'll unpack that shortly, but before we do, let's start. Let's take it back. Let's talk about where music came into your life.
I must probably high school, I guess. Sort of listening. I used to listen to like tons and tons of music. Always been like really into it. My family's not overly, like my parents are not overly musical, but I just kind of, listened to heaps of music and sort of play guitar and that sort of stuff through high school and worked at a radio station and that kind of thing.
Yeah, sick. Yeah. And so what sort of music were you into back then?
Kind of a bit of everything from sort of like pop punk to like Rage Against the Machine to sort of gangster rap to kind of just anything really. Yeah.
Anything that just hit you and you just stuck with it.
Yeah, pretty much. Kind of just, I guess I just sort of listened to as like everything that was going on and
Yeah.
Was
there anything that like you remember sticking out to you about that the music that you were listening to, or it just made you feel good?
Probably just kind of just made me feel good, I guess. That's sort of the main thing. Like a lot of my friends were doing that, sort of something to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
Yeah, and so do you remember if there was any kind of analytical aspect to listening to your music, or was it a lot of just taking it in and being a very passive listener?
I think initially it's probably like just a lot more sort of passive listener stuff, and then sort of as I got older and sort of listened to more stuff, it was sort of like I would sort of be like, how have they done that? What's going on there? There was sort of I remember reading some stuff about sort of Dave Grohl and Nirvana and Pink Floyd and things like that. Like I have, a vivid memory of like listening to like Pink Floyd LPs and things like that. I guess it's just sort of, as I sort of got older and listened to more stuff, I kind of got more interested in sort of how they did things rather than the things themselves.
Yeah, for sure. And was there like, when you were, listening to those things like Pink Floyd and Nirvana and stuff, what was it that you were listening for? Do you remember? Was there specific things, or was it more just like, how did they do that in general?
Yeah, just sort of like, probably more like the emotion. At sort of like in high school, sort of the emotion of things and how it sort of made me feel at the time. And then sort of, just as I sort of listened to more stuff, it was like, oh, that sort of vocal is like, sounds different to this one, or that guitar sounds different to this one, or what is that weird noise in the background, or that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you remember if there was like any specific producers or engineers that you were listening to and you're like, that is what I love, that like whatever they do, that's what I love?
At the time, probably no.
Yeah.
But looking back, probably like I probably lean towards more like some producers more than others, I guess. So like, yeah, or some, yeah. Not sort of knowingly at the time. I wasn't sort of like producer fanboying in high school.
I think a lot of the thing with, especially with those acts that you were talking about earlier, is a lot of them were kind of, they had that sound because they had the same producers and engineers, and they, you know, the record labels would like be like, okay, we want to replicate that with this artist, and we'll just hire the same people and do it. So it's not necessarily like, I love that producer. Although these days when we, you know, have access to, you know, YouTube and stuff, and we can see behind the scenes of how people do things, we can definitely say that is a producer that we love. But back then, I guess it was a lot more of, you know, this creates that vibe of what we're looking for.
Totally.
So we choose that engineer.
It's sort of like, I don't know, was that sort of early 2000s? So it's almost like pre-internet. So just downloading shit off like LimeWire and stuff like that, and bad MP3s, going around friends groups and things like that. Yeah,
absolutely. And so then talk to us about how you then moved into, you know, being an engineer yourself. Where did that start?
Probably got into, like, sort of thought about it more. So after I finished school, I lived in Europe for like 18 months and sort of did that thing and sort of just thought about, I guess because over that time I sort of thought about what I wanted to do more and more. And then, started an arts degree and realized it just really wasn't for me. And then moved down to Melbourne and did a course at SAE for a year. And then sort of all just sort of went from there. Worked at a studio up in Sydney for a while and kind of got sick of Sydney and moved back down to Melbourne, and then got in with Sing Sing, and I'm sort of still here.
Yeah, beautiful. So do you remember kind of what those experiences were like in the early days? Like, do you remember, you know, anything specific about it, or was there just like a general overall kind of learning phase?
In terms of
just like in the early days for school, like, you know, schooling, and then, you know, the early spaces that you're working out of.
Yeah, doing the course, it was just a bit more, like, I didn't really know anything going into that, so it was I guess that was a bit sort of learning the basics of everything, which was kind of nice. And then sort of through assisting and stuff, it was really like just learning how different microphones react and how to work with people, how a session runs, how, I guess then it was sort of mixing on boards and that sort of thing, how all these consoles work and how the automation systems work and how studios sort of function as an entity in a sense.
Yeah,
how they're sort
absolutely.
of patched in, how this thing syncs with that, why this does this, and all the sort of nerdy back end shit.
Yeah. And so were you drawn towards that like more technical side of things, or were you more focused on the people and how to work with people, or was it just a combination?
I guess when I started at Sing Sing, it was just a bit more, I kind of just wanted to be the first person that everyone called. So I was sort of learning how everything works so that when I'm assisting, everything just works. And I know every problem that could possibly arise and every little idiosyncrasy of the studio, and I can fix everything. I can I can sort of make a session run smoother as the assistant at that time. And so that was sort of one of my like goals, was to make that happen. And then through that sort of, just sort of working with, there was still sort of, you know, 2-3 week long sessions at that time. So sort of working with bands and being in the room for sometimes like really, really, really long hours for 3 weeks. You kind of get to see everyone's different personality at that point. And so like you sort of really thrown in the deep end in terms of dealing with different psychologies and how people function and how to get the best out of different sort of personality types.
And do you remember
it just kind of oozes in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Do you remember seeing like commonalities between, from session to session or artist to artist? Was there common threads like, we always seem to have these issues, or was it more like completely different every single time? You got to figure out people, and that's where,
Yeah.
your attention is.
Personality wise, like everyone's kind of different, but you could sort of tell, I guess, yeah, you could sort of tell in the sense that if people hadn't ever been to a studio before, they're going to be hung up about these things. If people, if this is their third or fourth record, then they're not really going to be hung up about studio things and vibe things. It's more just like, can we just do it, please? And I can go home. Sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of making, and sort of then you like really, really quickly can pick that up. Like first 5 minutes of a session, you can pick up sort of personality types just by talking to people and seeing, or even before the session, if you're producing and you can go have a coffee with them, you'd be like, oh, okay, it's going to be something like this. And it's like really easy, and you can sort of put everyone at ease a lot easier that way.
Do you remember that there was like any sort of things that you had a hard time learning at the start, in the first few years? Was it like, I always seem to run into these sorts of issues, or was it just a whole bunch of different stuff?
It was just a whole bunch of different stuff. I think that at first it's sort of like assisting and sort of like the etiquette of being an assistant is sort of such a big deal, and sort of making sure that you're there and you're kind of silent in a sense, and you just make it work, and you kind of converse through the producer or the engineer rather than, and you learn when to speak up and that sort of thing, which was sort of, I guess that's sort of the hardest thing to learn as an assistant. A lot of people sort of struggle with that. Like I've had assistants now, and it's sort of, it's still like a bit of a thing. It's like, you're not running the session, mate. Can you
just sit back and do what I tell you.
A little bit. But
absolutely.
Yeah, so it's sort of getting that and just learning that you're there to learn and you're there to sort of absorb all this information by osmosis, really. And by sitting in on hundreds and hundreds of sessions, you kind of just like, oh, everyone seems to be using these mics on guitars. Why are they using those mics on guitars? Or everyone's used a different set of overheads this week or this month. Like what's going on there? And so like when you start to engineer your own sessions, you sort of like, oh, I really liked when this guy recorded this and he used these things, so I'll just do that. And you sort of start as a bit of like a monkey see, monkey do kind of vibe, and then you start sort of working out like why things are done, why they chose those microphones, why they sort of ran the session the way they did, as opposed to, because that's way more important than the microphones they chose, is sort of the what they were going for, and the thought process behind that is like way more. It's something way more to know than like, oh, they put up U47 on the vocal, sick. Like, why did they do that? That's sort of way more important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can imagine working with a whole bunch of different people would have been so valuable to get kind of those little insights and, just like seeing the way different people talk to people, or, like put people at ease, or, like you said, choosing certain things for certain times. That would have been invaluable just to add to your own arsenal. I love the sound of that. I didn't myself get to have an assistant position anywhere. I kind of just did my own thing for a while. So yeah, I can imagine how valuable. Do you have any kind of like advice for anyone that wants to go through that assisting route? Like what do you suggest that they do? Yeah.
Talk to studios or producers that you like, call people like yourself, call people like me, people like other people we've had on the podcast, and sort of commercial studios, and just sort of see if the positions are around. Like a lot of the time there's sort of, budgets are sort of pushed a lot of the time. So sometimes, you might be doing things for free the first time, but a lot of the people like myself and a lot of other people I know don't really like having people that work for us for free for too long. Like, the first session, you sort of a work experience kid. So
yeah,
I guess that's sort of reasonable. But anything after that, you're sort of taking the piss a little bit, because we've all been in through that where, we've worked for free for, 6 months or something sometimes. Yeah. And it's just sort of, it's not a viable way to keep people in the industry.
It's important as well, because you you know, it makes you more professional when you're, you know, doing things for favors as opposed to doing things for money. You know, it's like, okay, well,
Definitely.
these people's money is important to them. Their time is important. I don't want to waste that. And it kind of forces you to put on that professional hat and take things a little bit more seriously as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, nice. And so let's get into kind of more specifics of the stuff that you've worked on. You know, some of the some amazing artists that you worked. And the first time I heard of you was when you were working with Ceres. I love all the Ceres stuff that you did with them.
Such an incredible band.
Yeah,
the best people, and such an incredible band.
Yeah. I was lucky enough Frankie was the drummer in my old band. And so that's
awesome.
how I knew them. And he joined Ceres like at the same time that he was still in the band. So I was close with them back then.
At one point he was playing in about 4 or 5 bands, I think. So
yeah, he gets around.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's a bloody legend. I love those dudes. And yeah, like obviously some mixing work that you've done, all the different stuff that you've done. It's like some crazy artists, like Avalanches was, engineering. You've done Squid Fishing, Zach Leo. You've done Angus and Julia Stone. Like these are some really, really well known artists around Australia. So talk us through, where did those opportunities arise? Was it osmosis? Was it people you knew? Talk us through that.
Yeah, so I guess things like the Avalanches was sort of people I knew. So their general mix engineer, Tony Espy, is a friend of mine, and I was assisting at the time, and he sort of got me in initially as an assistant and sort of ended up, sort of engineering a lot of stuff on that album, recording vocals and things like that. People, was it Ceres? I think I hit them up like way back. And then, we ended up, meeting up and getting on and making a record and then making another record.
Yeah.
And a few other random bits and pieces and a few other, it's sort of like a few things that sort of come through Sing Sing, a few things, or being associated with Sing Sing, a few things that sort of come through word of mouth. Other things just like completely random.
Yeah. And so does your approach from project to project change? Do you like to have, especially obviously if you're producing and stuff like that, is there a lot of pre-production, those sorts of things? Is there a lot of pre-recording chats? What does that look like for you?
So it really depends on the project. It depends how involved I am as a producer, if I'm more sort of executive producing or if I'm more like really in there getting my hands dirty, or if I'm sort of producer in, sort of more of a co-production kind of thing. So it sort of depends. Like a lot of things, like Ceres and Squid Fishing and a few other bands like that, we'd have like a couple of like recording sessions beforehand. Just like I'd take a rig out to the rehearsal space and we'd record things and go through things and sort of workshop stuff in the rehearsal space. And then there's sessions where we're just sort of meeting up and having coffee and running through demo notes. And then other times it's almost like, we've met up, but then sort of working stuff out in the studio in a sense. So
do you have a preferred method, or is there like a specific way that you recognize that works the best, or is it more dependent on the people that you're working with?
It's really dependent on the people I'm working with. I guess I think a lot of the time it's if it's the first time I've worked with a band, I'd sort of like to at least catch up with them a couple of times before we go in the studio, whether that's for a single or whether it's for an EP or an album or something, just to sort of get to know them a bit better, so that when we're in the studio, it's sort of more matesy than like client relationship. So that sort of thing. And then you got to sort of work out like what they sort of want out of the album or the song, which I think is really important, because at the end of the day, sort of my job, whether I'm like just pressing record or mixing things or producing things, sort of like making what they hear in their head a reality. That's sort of like the job. And so working out whether they hear anything in their head or whether that's something that I can do, or whether we need a studio, whether we can just do it in my space, whether we need to get other musicians in, whether it's sort of what sort of is involved in making this thing that they want to make.
Right. And when it comes to like sonics and things like that, you know, your diversity is something that sticks out to me. You know, you've worked on, like we've said, like, you know, the emo punk sort of stuff like Ceres, but then you've done, you know, some more kind of stripped back poppier sort of stuff. But what I've noticed is that all of it sounds really organic and true to life. And is that a real focus of you when you, you know, talking with an artist? Like, how do you obtain what you want that final sound to be like?
I'm like big on recording it how you want it to sound. So like I feel like once you've pressed record, it should kind of sound like a record. Minus like, you know, unless there's going to be 10 guitar overdubs and an orchestra on top of it, that you're obviously not going to record live. But when they sort of come to have a listen, whether we're recording out in a church somewhere or whether we're in an actual recording studio, it should sound as close to a song as possible, as quickly as possible. And that sort of informs every other decision that you make down the track and sort of keeps that organic live kind of feel to it. Whether we replace everything in later is sort of an irrelevance at that point because it's all being recorded live and there's that feel sort of embedded in it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's like, is the reason for that is so the client gets an understanding of what it's going to sound like already, or like what's the main purpose of that?
It's sort of for me as well. Like I don't really just want to listen to drums or just listen to it. Like it's boring.
Yeah,
yeah. Like, and it sort of has no relevance on its own. If I'm just listening to a drum track, it's like cool. This could be the coolest sounding drum track ever, but I don't know if the kick pattern works with the bass. I don't know if the snare sound works with the guitars. I don't know if there needs to be that much room. I don't know if there needs to be, if we're in the right room. I don't know all these things. I don't know if the cymbals are too bright. Unless it sounds like a band, or if it's a band, unless it sounds like as close as possible to what it's supposed to sound like at the end.
I love it.
You sort of doing things back to front in a sense. And if it sucks, just do it again. Yeah. Like if you make the wrong decisions, if the guitar's too distorted, if you don't like it, if you mess it up, just do it again. We can do that now.
Obviously we've got the flexibility to do that with digital now, but it's like, it's a cool point. And I don't think a lot of people would necessarily have the confidence to do that, or, you know, the ability to recognize, hey, this just isn't working. Let's go back to back to the start and try and get the actual right sound.
I didn't do that for the longest time. And I would try to polish turds and roll them in so much glitter. And it just, and it's just like there's a point where you're not actually making anything any better, or you're making the best version of that version. Yeah. But that version might not be the best version. And so you're going like as hard as you...
How do you approach, like how do you know? Like what tells you when something isn't right?
There's generally like it feels weird. Like there's something doesn't feel right. And it might not happen when you've recorded it. You might get to like recording keeper vocals on it and be like, actually this sucks. Or like this isn't like there's bits here that shouldn't be here, or we've like it's the wrong tempo or things like that. And it's sort of being able to do that earlier and earlier is like a good thing.
Yeah, obviously that comes with experience the more you work on stuff.
But there's been points, I just finished a record for a band called Big Words, and there's like one song on that we completely redid because they're like Will and Kieran, Will especially is like a perfectionist and sort of lived and breathed that album. And there was a point where it was like, hey, I'm not into this. And I'm like, no, we've like never really been into it. Like the first time we recorded it, we were like, it's good, but it's not great. And so so we just re-recorded the whole thing. Yeah. And we were in a position sort of financially where we could do that, which was sort of lucky.
Yeah. Well, that's handy. And I think that what you've pointed out that sticks out to me is how important the communication side of things is.
Definitely.
If you weren't on good terms with that band, or you even just hadn't unpacked the relationship enough, you wouldn't be able to say something like that. Hey, this feels like shit. Like, Let's fucking
Yeah.
do it all again because it'll end up in a better product. You know, without that communication, without that relationship, you might insult them. Whereas, you know, when you're good, it's like, yeah, no, I trust you. I believe that what you're saying is the right thing.
Yeah. I think the relationship thing's really important. And I'm sort of a big one on not saying things are great unless they actually are, which is like really important, I think. So when you speak up and when you say something, it sort of carries weight. So if someone does a shitty vocal take, don't say it's amazing. Like,
Yeah.
Because then when it is amazing and you say it's amazing, it's sort of like, you know, you've done 10 takes. Why have you done 10 takes? You said the first one was amazing. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
And it wasn't.
Exactly.
So being able to sort of, being quite, not sparse, but being knowing when to say things is really important in that sense.
Yeah, that's huge. And then so when it comes to, you know, difficult topics that you might have to have with artists, like how do you deal with that sort of like adversity or like discomfort, you know, whether that's an interpersonal thing or whether it's the subject matter that you're making or anything like that? How do you deal with those sorts of uncomfortable conversations?
If it's sort of a musical thing, at the end of the day, like it's not my record. And I'm probably like, as much as I might love doing the album, I'm probably like, I might listen to it once. Like I'm probably never going to really listen to it again. So it's not my album and it's taken me like a really long time to get to that point where it's like, at the end of the day, like it's not my name on it. I'm not in the band. It's not my album. So like, if there's something that I'm unsure about, but the artist is like in love with, then that takes precedence. Unless I can explain and bring them around to my sort of way of thinking, it's sort of, they get veto in that sense. And that's sort of where being quite careful with what you say and how when you say ideas, if you're just throwing like scattergunning, throwing shit at the wall all the time, they're not going to have any idea or they're not going to know when to actually back you in.
Right.
And when you're ready, when you're willing to back yourself in, like what you sort of have to choose your hill that you're going to die on.
Yeah.
Every now and then on an album. And it's sort of,
I love that. That's a fantastic
like
point.
Whether that's like the tempo or like a guitar part or things like that. There's sort of like, you know, every song has its own little hill and you have to, and if you have to decide whether it's something you actually care about because it's the artist's album.
Yeah.
And so that sort of takes precedence in that sense. In regards to personal things, I don't know. I'm still a bit shit at it. So that's where sort of becoming friends with them helps.
Yeah, for sure.
Because like, then it's just like friends having a chat. And I guess if it's sort of still, I guess it all sort of comes back to the music at the end of the day. And that's sort of where it's like, it's not my album. So they get veto. And it's never like a personal insult at that point. I've tried to get better and better and not taking things like that personally.
Yeah, well, I think it's an important point is like if you're viewing everything through the lens of at the end of the day, this is about the actual song and the recording and the album and stuff, then that definitely makes those conversations easier because you can look at it from an objective perspective rather than being personal and like, yeah, you're right. It's not our record. It's theirs and they're the ones that are super emotionally attached to it as much as we, like you said, might like the album. I'm just literally copying what you said. It's like, it is so true though. It's like we're not as emotionally attached to those music, to those words as the artists are.
Yeah, all the things they went to get to that point in the lyrics or the song or, you know, maybe it was a heartbreak. Maybe it's their first album and they've literally been writing it for 20 years. Like all those things, it's sort of, I'm a blow in. And as much as I try to like emotionally invest in the album, it's not my album.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Let's talk more specifically about your, you know, mixing process and things like that. So talk us through some of the different ways that you might approach working on someone's record, whether it's, okay, let's start with, you know, you haven't actually done production or engineering on that album and you get it as a mixing job. Let's talk through that sort of process.
So the first thing I do is I'll set up the sessions either at home or at the studio and just sort of have a quick listen through, make sure everything's there, sort of play the rough mix, make sure that everything's in time and everything lines up.
Yep.
And if it does, that's cool. And I'll do, maybe it's one song, maybe it's 5 songs, maybe it's 10 songs. I'll try and set up as many as possible so that I'm not setting up songs and then just going straight into mixing them. Because that sort of just does, I don't think it's a good use of your headspace because you're thinking about other things when you're supposed to be sort of thinking creatively in a sense. And then import my mix template and then pull all the faders down to 0 and then listen to the ref, see which thing's kind of important. And then generally, if it's like a really big vocal song, I'll pull the vocal up, make the vocal sound good and then pull it back down and then start on something else and make sure there's an interplay with the things that are important, whether that's the guitar and the vocal or the drums and the bass and that sort of thing. And then generally I'll end up starting with the drums, but if I've already got sort of a vocal sound there, I can just pull it up and when I want to hear that. And I sort of have that space taken care of and it's sort of just sitting there. And I like to work really fast. Like I want it to sound like a song in 3 or 4 hours. I want it to be pretty much done.
Yeah.
To the point where I can like the rest of the time I'm just twiddling knobs that no one's ever going to notice. So I kind of want it done in 3 or 4 hours.
Beautiful.
And then I'll have a break and then listen again and then maybe do another one. Yeah.
Yeah. Was there any kind of things that you learned over time that helped you to get to that quickness, or were you always working that fast?
No, I was really slow and shit for ages. I think it's just trusting your instincts because generally, like I've found, like my first instinct is more often than not the right one. And definitely in mixing is like getting references, like huge thing. Like the amount of I still do it where like I'll start a mix without the band having sent me a reference and then they'll send me a reference when I'm done and I've like just taken it somewhere completely wrong. And I'm like, oh fuck, I have to do this again. Yeah. Start from scratch. Yeah. So getting a Spotify playlist or getting a bunch of artists that you should listen to and then just while you're setting up the song or the morning, just put it on and just listen to things so that your headspace is kind of there. They're like, oh, I really like Dua Lipa's vocal sound or I really like this St. Vincent guitar thing or like the drums on this or rah, rah, rah. And it might be like a whole scattergun idea of things, but it all kind of leads you somewhere. You're like, oh, okay, they like this kind of tight drum thing and they're like kind of distorted guitars and they want the guitars they want the vocals sort of like right there and it doesn't move and things like that. It sort of all leads somewhere. Or it's like, oh, it's this 60s-y thing and the drums kind of aren't really there and it's sort of like a flabby bass and rah, rah, rah. So it's sort of like you get in the headspace of what you're trying to do and then flicking constant. I like to have I got a monitor controller where I can flick through several different inputs and sort of listen to things like super quickly. So I'll just have like Tidal running, like the playlist that they've sent me or like a few things just sort of running constantly. Yeah. Or if it's just one thing I'm working on, it might just be a song that's sort of just on repeat and I'll flick to that constantly.
Yeah, I love it. And
just sort of reference.
And another thing that I like to do on that, and it's more production when you're actually with the band in person, is having Spotify open at all times. So anytime that someone says something, as soon as they say that artist or that song, drag it into that reference playlist so that you can reference it later. And you might have heaps to go off or whatever. Might be overwhelming, but that's a good thing because you can actually pinpoint, I remember they wanted that specific guitar tone in this song, and you might keep a separate notes thing open and write that in. That's an extra level. I don't do that, but it might help. It might, whatever helps get to that end product and, having the references in mind so that you can not steer the ship in the wrong direction. Definitely. Like you were saying.
You're sort of creating like a sonic mood board and you're just sort of, it's just something to sort of reference constantly, which helps sort of, make it happen quickly.
Hey, thanks so much for listening so far. There is plenty more to come, so don't go anywhere. I just wanted to let you know that this podcast is made completely independently by myself with no sponsors. So if you like what you hear and you would like to show your support, you can send a donation to the PayPal link, paypal.me/whatsthatsound. The link is also in the show notes. Thanks so much for your support, and let's get back to it. All right, so yeah, tell me how that sort of differs to stuff that you might have worked on yourself if you've done production or engineering on an album that you're about to mix. What are the differences there?
Probably more in the amount of work I have to do, I think. So sometimes sort of when people send you things to mix, there's a lot of almost like re-engineering you have to do to sort of make things sound the way you want them to sound, or they sort of need to sound. Whereas I find if I've recorded, I kind of know where I'm headed, like from like the choice of microphone to the choice of guitar or the choice of amp. There's a path.
Yeah.
And so everything informs everything else in that sense.
Yep.
So I've chosen this mic because I want it to do this, which means I have to do less in mixing because it's already doing what I want it to do.
That's it, yeah.
And so the more I've done this, I've realized it's like the most important part is like the front end.
Yeah.
What guitar you're playing, what amp you're playing, what drums you're hitting, are the drums in tune? And then it sort of just gets less and less important after that.
Yeah,
in a sense.
Yeah, I agree, and I've found like when you get stems from other artists or other producers or something like that, there's kind of in some way less of an attachment to how it sounds, and you can manipulate things a little bit more to get it to where you want it to or where the artist wants it to be anyway. So it's like once we've got it ourselves in the recording process, it's like, no, this is how they want it to sound. So it's like it's a much smoother process to get it to that end place anyway. So yeah.
And you also have less emotional attachment to that bit that took like an hour to get.
Yeah.
And it was a fucking disaster to record. You have less emotional attachment to it because you don't know how much it hurt.
Yeah, exactly.
To get
exactly.
there.
Yeah.
So you might just mute it.
Yep.
You might be real savage with stuff. Yeah. And that you might not have been on a production that you've been in since like the day dot. Yeah.
Do you have some favorite elements that you like to work on in the track? Are you a drums guy, vocals? What's
probably like drums and vocals.
Yeah.
Probably mostly. Drums because you're always trying to make drums sound better. Even if you're like at the end and you're about to print the mix, you'll listen to it, you'll be like, I don't know, man. I don't know. And it's just constant. It's like, is this snare drum too cracky? Is it too loud? Is it too douchey? Is it like, do I like it anymore? Why is the kick so loud now? Like it's sort of this constant thing throughout the mix. And it's such a huge instrument that it takes up everything.
It does, yeah.
So it's sort of something that you're always kind of tweaking. You're always fiddling with something.
Yeah.
And vocals because like no one really cares if the vocals suck. Like no one will care about the song. It's like that's it. That's what people listen to something for. That's where the emotion lies. A lot of the time it is in the vocal delivery and the vocal performance and the vocal sound.
Yeah.
And you can take something that's sort of kind of bland and average and make it incredible, which is like a really nice feeling.
Absolutely. And so how do you know when something's done then?
When I'm just like staring at the screen and I'm like, I don't know anymore. Just sort of, when I'm just like, when I've listened to it 5 times in a row and I've done nothing.
Yeah.
I'm like, look, that's probably it, I guess. And because I like to work really fast, it's just like you kind of reach that point really quickly. And I heard someone say something that's like, it doesn't matter if it's wrong. If you get there quickly, you know it's wrong quicker.
Right. That's
like,
cool.
So just do it and just back yourself. And then if you need to tweak it later, then, I might not send it to the artist when it's done. I might wait 2 days and pull it up again and listen to it at home or listen to it on a run or like when I go for a walk or if I'm on the train or something like that, I might listen to it and be like, actually, nah, not in love with it. And then go back and tweak.
Yeah. I think some really important
Yeah.
points there, like one being the get there fast, because you can, like you said, you can always fix things later. I think it's really important to move through a song and like you said, you love to get it sounding like a song as quickly as possible. But even for people that might be just starting out, it's more important to get everything there rather than going, yep, this is the drum sound I want for 10 hours.
Yeah.
Get it there quicker
definitely.
and get the song sounding like a song. Even if it's not the finished mix, get it to that point quicker so that you can go, I can easily hear what needs fixing. That's the
Definitely,
first
because
great
then-
point. Yeah. Go on.
Then you're working on emotion at that point. It's a song,
Yeah.
and then you're working on emotion, which is sort of
Yeah.
what it's all about.
Yeah. And the other point that I liked was don't necessarily just send it as soon as you're done. Take that time to approach it from different headspaces, work on something else and then come back to it, listen to some really great music that you love, then come back to it and go, what am I feeling now? Like you said, using obviously different headphones, different speaker systems or anything like that. They're the obvious ones. But I think more emotion and taking yourself out of that feeling that you had when you were mixing it is a big thing, because then you can be less attached to it and be like, no, what stands out?
Definitely, you're able to see the forest for the trees in a sense. Like you can take back and be like, okay, how does this work as a song?
Yeah,
I don't hear the hours I spent tweaking this kick drum or
exactly.
faffing around with the guitar automation or something. It's just like, how does it feel as a song? What was it missing? What does it have? What do I need to give it?
Yeah. And that's a good thing too for production, I think, is like, if you're working on multiple songs with the band, it's like, let's just park this for a bit. Let's work on something else. And then if we feel like when we come back to it that we need to add something, we've got that perspective on it. That's also, something that's really cool. So let's get nerdy. Let's get specific about gear and stuff. I always like to unpack what your favorite bits of gear are and why. So let's start off with some of the bits of hardware that you're enjoying using at the moment.
So I've got I guess I'm just lucky. I've acquired a little bit of gear over the time I've been doing it, and I've got I've got a Retro 176 compressor that I adore, and I sort of use that on like most things. It sounds incredible. It's one of my favorite. It's the first nice compressor I ever bought, and it's first nice bit of kit I ever bought, and I love it.
What is it
incredible.
about that compressor that is special to you?
It just sounds amazing. It does this thing with the top end that I can't get anything else to do. It's pretty transparent. I don't know. It sounds amazing. It does everything I want it to. It has sort of a nice EQ curve as well, which is cool.
Yep, beautiful. And
then,
what about? Yep, keep going.
Oh no. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, like, what about microphones? What are some of your favorite, microphones that you like using?
So, this microphone I'm using is a Lomo 19A19, which is a Russian tube microphone from the 60s that
Never heard of it.
I've wanted one for ages. This producer, I kind of love his work. He was really into one. I've wanted one for years, and I managed to find one pretty cheap during lockdown. So I bought it, and it didn't work, and I got it fixed, and now it works. And
Sick.
it sounds amazing. Yeah.
Fantastic.
But other than that, like, what else do I use? I've got depends what I'm recording, really.
Yeah.
This thing sounds amazing on vocals and the most sort of acoustic instruments. So I use this a lot. Or, it really depends on what I'm recording.
True. Any other bits of hardware that you can't live without?
I bought a Trinov, which is a like room correction computer.
Ooh, nice.
I bought a Trinov ST2 Pro, and it's probably the best piece of kit I've ever bought.
Unreal.
It is amazing.
Yeah.
Basically, it's sort of like a room correction thing, but it's a standalone computer, and it does phase correction and EQ and all this other weird black magic shit, and it sounds incredible.
Unreal.
Yeah.
Yeah, sick.
So I literally can't live without that.
Yeah, beautiful. That's sick.
Yeah, I had the loaner rig, and I was like, shit.
Fuck, I got to buy it now. Damn it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Nice. Well, moving on to software. First of all, which DAW do you use?
Pro Tools.
Yep.
Yeah, sort of always use Pro Tools and just, I guess I'm stuck with it. I know it inside out. 10,000 hours thing. Just works for me.
Yeah, 100%. And it's, I mean, by the sounds of things, all the different places that you've worked out of and engineered and assisted and stuff, I'm guessing most of them were using Pro Tools.
Yeah, all kind of big studios will run Pro Tools, and like a few of them will run Logic and stuff. And I don't know, they're all the same, really.
Yeah,
At the end of the day, they all record things, and you can mix them like whatever works.
Yeah,
I'm not sort of a bolted on.
No, fair enough.
Fanboy of anything, so just like whatever makes it happen.
Yeah, that's it. And what about plugins wise? What are some of your go-tos? I guess let's start with compression in the box.
In the box, what have I been using? I've used the Distressor plugin from UAD a bit. The 1176s from UAD, a lot of them. A bunch of the like harmonic stuff from the Plugin Alliance bundle, like the black box, the HG2 thing, and the Phil's Cascade. I use that quite a bit.
Yep.
And then I'll use like a lot of channel strip compressors, so like the SSL channel from Brainworks or the Focusrite channel or things like that. Like just sort of use the compressors on that, just because I don't know, it sort of came up using like boards and things, and it was just easy to use the compressor, and they sound great. The way they react, I know the way they react and what they do and all that sort of thing.
And again, your stuff sounds very musical. It sounds very like, it sounds like a band. It sounds like a band in a room. You're hearing the songs, you're hearing everything. Intelligibility is obviously a big part of that, but at the very least, it's like it sounds like, the drums sound like drums. The guitars don't sound like, choppy, stuff that actually sounds like a computer, you know what I mean? So those channel strips and stuff allow you to achieve those sorts of sounds really easily,
Yeah, like Fab Filter on everything, basically. And then, I remember listening to someone told me years ago, it was like, if you want it to sound better, subtract it. If you want to sound different, add. So that's sort of like, it's sort of that. I'd take that philosophy into sort of plug-in choice and mixing and all that sort of thing.
And same thing for EQs. You're mostly using channel strip EQ.
Yeah, lots of channel strip EQ. Lots of it depends what I'm kind of going for. So sort of like surgical stuff, Fab Filter.
Yeah.
If it's sort of or like Soothe, that sort of dynamic EQ thing. If it's sort of vibe things, or sort of lean more towards sort of like the 1081 from UAD or like the 1073 from UAD or that kind of stuff. Or if I want sort of a more mid-rangey thing, maybe like the SSL channel or an API. It's depending on what I kind of want it to do. Kind of
for sure.
Yeah.
Any other Desert Island plugins that you again can't live without?
Now, like it's this plugin called the Sunset Sound Rooms. I think IK Multimedia make it or something. I'm not sure.
Right.
T-Rax.
Yeah,
and
that's okay. Yeah.
The most incredible reverb ever. The rooms are amazing. It's got like a couple of plates and a spring, and they sound incredible. And it's got chambers, and it's super low DSP, and it just sounds amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Literally use that on every single session, like multiple times now. So I don't think I could live without that.
Yeah.
And probably, I think sound toys, I guess everyone says sound toys. So
yeah, true. Reverb for me has always, and I think will forever be, the hardest sonic aspect to any mix. And
definitely
to find the right reverb, especially from song to song, artist to artist, it is a constant struggle just to find a reverb that works. So to be able to find one that, that works for you across the board for a lot of different things, like look for that,
Yeah. And I might not use, I use room emulation a lot. Like, I I think that's sort of part of the thing making it sound like a band. It's sort of everyone's in the room eventually. So whether it's the same room for things or different rooms, it just kind of gives it a space that's not cluttery. I guess you can kind of put a guitar just in the back, or you can to make it sort of sound a bit more like it has a space or it exists in a space.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it, man. Was there any other kind of workflow things that you noticed over time, apart from templates and things like that? Was there any software-related workflow things that you wanted to point out that made your process really fast?
Lots of like parallel compression I use a lot. The Isotope mouth declick plugin that like changed my life.
Yeah,
that's on everything. Like it's on my vocal preset channel preset thing. It just it's incredible.
Yeah,
that's kind of probably workflow wise. That's
what do you find kind of overarching over the whole, producer engineer hat? What do you find are some of the most difficult things in general about being a producer engineer?
One, the business side of it is something that no one really teaches you. Is like you're effectively like running a business, and that's like really difficult because for like the longest time I sucked at it, and I was like constantly broke and it was shit. And so once you sort of sort that out, and you're like, oh, okay, I have to get my life in order.
Yeah,
maybe that's part of growing up.
Yeah,
actually being
absolutely.
a fucking adult.
Yep.
Yeah, once you kind of get that sorted, that's sort of the main thing, because that breeds so much stress and breeds so much other like heartache that makes everything else suck.
It's so true. It's so true.
That's sort of a big one. If you're working for yourself, sort that shit out early. Put systems into place early, and it'll just like make your life so much more chill.
Without getting into
but in terms of
without getting into too much detail about that, was there any kind of like general things that you could talk about that made you feel more at ease in that regard?
Splitting up everything I earn into percentages. So like X percentage go into a rent account. I had like, I've got 6 or 7 bank accounts and all in the one thing. And it's like just splitting percentages up so that like, oh, okay, cool. I've got my rent paid for the next 6 months. I don't actually have to worry about that. I can see that in that account I've got enough to cover that over the next 6 months. Like that sort of takes a fair bit of stress off. Just being able to see that, I've put like my super away. I've got, money in my tax account so that when I have to pay that, it's not like this huge stress.
That's massive.
Yeah. So like a friend of mine told me he was doing that, and I was like, holy shit, that's the best idea ever. I'm going to do it.
It's one of those things where you're like, why didn't I do this already?
Yeah. It's like I'm fucking 30 and I'm broke. Like sort your shit out. Like
that's so good.
Yeah. So like being able to sort that out early is like a huge one. Running it like a business. Is a huge one. But in terms of like just engineer producer stuff, like commit early, like trust you, like back yourself. Because like if you're worried about stuff, then the artist is going to be worried about you being worried about stuff.
Yeah.
So just like back yourself. Even if it's bullshit and you don't trust yourself, like just back yourself. You can always record it again. Like if it's a guitar or a vocal or something, just do it again.
Yeah.
Don't reamp.
I love it, man. It's so good. And you've kind of somewhat answered the final question that I ask everyone, which is, do you have any advice for anyone that might just be kind of starting out, whether they're a producer, engineer, songwriter, anything like that? Is there any kind of final like main bits of advice like that?
Just do it.
Yeah.
Like I've worked with like a lot of people and they're like, I don't know enough. Like I really want to songwrite for people, but I just don't know about enough. It's like, just do it. Like no one knows anything. Like no one has any idea what they're doing. Like back yourself and commit. Like, just do it. Because that's like, so even if you haven't been taught, like, like me coming through Studio System or going to like SAE or something like that, like someone like the Avalanches, they made all that shit up as they went along. And that's sort of why they sound like they sound, is because they use shit the wrong way. Like I remember pulling up a session and being like, what the fuck have you done? But it
Like,
sounds
keep
amazing.
Keep it.
Yeah. And so like, you just not, like you don't touch any of their bussing because it's like, I don't even know what the fuck you've done here. It's this gone to this to this and this. And it's just like, it's wrong. Like it makes my head spin, whatever you've done here. But like whether you know what you're doing or not, it's just like back yourself in, because if almost to the point where like, if you know less, you're probably going to make something cooler because you don't know how to do it the right way.
Yeah,
I
love it,
right
man.
Way.
That's great advice. That's so good. And yeah, you're right. When you listen back to some of the early stuff, like I say this so often, like there's some drum sounds that I got back, 5-10 years ago that I would never be able to recreate today, but it's got something.
Totally.
It's got something about it that just feels great. And emotion in music a lot of the time comes from when you just go with it. So it's a really, 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 really great point, man.
Because you're really capturing like a moment in time. And that's sort of, whether you're going to love that moment in time 5 years later is sort of, who cares? Like,
exactly.
It's like a photograph. So
it's a relevant, good point. Yeah, man. I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been
probs.
sick.
It's been great fun.
Yeah, it has, definitely. Do you have any final things that you want to talk about that are coming up in the near future or anything like that, or anything you want to shout out?
Oh, a friend and I just signed a lease on a warehouse and we're building a studio next, or like, I don't know, I think we get the keys in 2 weeks. So, yeah.
Unreal.
We're building
Congrats.
a studio later this year. Yeah, it's like a sort of 3-4 room kind of studio, which will be fun.
That'll be nice.
That'll be cool. Yeah.
Fucking sick.
But yeah, see how that goes.
Awesome, man. And where can people find you if they want to look for you?
So got a website, which I am pretty sure is aarondobos.com. Pretty sure.
Yep.
And Instagram, I'm pretty sure is aaron.dobos.
Yep.
So I think
Beautiful.
that's right.
I'll have the links in the show notes anyway for anyone.
I haven't updated my website for a while, so I should really do that too.
Well, I was on it before and it's definitely still there. So
sweet. That's good.
Yeah, that's it.
Lucky it has a direct debit, otherwise it might not be.
True. Yep. No, we love the set and forget as business owners. Yep. Nice one, man.
Oh, totally.
Again, thank you. And thanks to everyone. Oh, you're welcome. Thanks to everyone that has made it this far through the chat. What really helps us is if you share this podcast around, whether that's directly in a conversation, which we don't always have these days, but either that or a DM or on a story or something like that. Any little bit of sharing that you can do for this podcast really helps us. And of course, follow and subscribe. That'll just keep you up to date with any new episode that'll be coming out. But again, thank you. And thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it.
No problems. Thank you.
And we will see you next time on What's That Sound podcast. Thanks for listening to What's That Sound. Make sure you hit follow or subscribe on your podcast platform to stay up to date with each new episode. We'll catch you next time.